Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Again, there's been a long break. I haven't even been able to keep up with monthly publishing, but there you go. This is season two, episode three, and I'm really excited. This has been a long time coming. This topic, breastfeeding, but also doing it with Carla, Carla, if I let you introduce yourself.
Yay, let's do that. Thanks so much for having me, first of all. So I'm Carla. Some people might know me as the Milky Life. My background is on midwifery. So I became a midwife in 2012, and I was a nurse prior to that. And I worked as a midwife for quite a while. And then I decided I wanted a bit of a change and moved on to neonatal nursing, which is what I'm currently doing for the NHS twice a week. I work in the NICU in Brighton. And in the middle of that, I became a lactation consultant and a tongue tie practitioner. But I like to call myself more an infant feeding specialist, I would say, because babies need to be fed, and it's not just about whether they're breastfed or not, whether it's that by choice or by we will get there. But ultimately, a baby needs to feed, and all families deserve good feeding support. So even though my qualification is IBCLC, so International Board Certified Lactation Consultant is a long name, I see myself more identify as an infant feeding specialist.
Yeah, and that's a really important point, isn't it? Because I think I've always wanted to think really carefully about how I covered feeding on the
Yeah.
podcast because I've actually done both. I bottle and formula fed my first, and my second I breastfed and then combi fed. But obviously, breastfeeding is just such an important topic. It's something that whatever that journey looks like for a mum, they're going to go through it and their own, and often, not often, always, we don't know what that journey is going to look like until baby's here and those
Yeah.
hormones are flowing. And sometimes it's a really, well, again, probably more of the case, it's a very emotionally charged topic.
100.
And I just wanted to make really clear at the beginning that this episode isn't about telling people that they must breastfeed. It's about having a discussion, informed choices, they're getting that support, and also on the whole, the maternal well-being, because we all know how much feeding and whatever that looks like for a woman and a family, how much that can impact your mental health. So what do you wish from your experience that every new parent knew about breastfeeding before their baby arrived?
So that's a great question, and I wish more people would ask that question. And there's two main things. One, that yes, it is a very natural thing. It is a biological aspect of feeding a baby, breastfeeding, right? And we say it's the most natural thing ever. It is, in the sense that we have breasts that produce breast milk, and our
Yeah.
infants are designed, almost programmed to crawl and find the breast and latch. So, from a physiological, anatomical, and biological point of view, it is a natural thing, but it's actually a skill that needs to be learned. It doesn't always, really, majority of the times, it doesn't just happen just like that. And one of the reasons why that's the case is because we are having babies in isolation. We have completely removed our community and our support system. We have a baby, we go home, and it's just sometimes the woman alone, sometimes their partner. And it's just that when it's supposed to be, we were supposed to grow up seeing babies at the breast. And when you see something done from when you're little, it stays in your brain as this thing that's done, and you observe it, and it's not an alien thing to do. So many people now, they're having babies in their 30s, 40s, and they've never held a baby before. So the whole family unit thing has become a rare thing. And so we're having babies in isolation, and that has removed that natural aspect of breastfeeding, and it's become more a skill that we
Mm,
have to learn. And that's okay.
mm.
That's how societies are now. It does make things more difficult, but we have to acknowledge that.
Yeah, I mean, I had my babies 2020 and 2023, and I obviously knew a lot more about breastfeeding when I went into my second pregnancy or
Mhm.
postnatal experience. But something that still really shocked me was the lack of support. I mean, I had both my babies in hospital. I had to, and that was, for a number of reasons. But I vividly remember someone coming round and just saying, like, how's he feeding? But really there was no real time spent someone coming around and being like, right, talk to me. What's your understanding of breastfeeding?
Yeah.
What's your plan? How does it feel like he's feeding? Like, it feels like there's still so much we need to do in terms of just that educational piece, but also practically. And there are so many, like, I'm really well connected into this world that you are in terms of postnatal health and what people think breastfeeding should look like. But there
Mhm.
are still so many things that just the other day I sent you something, didn't I? Because someone was saying
Oh,
about
yes.
using silver cups and nipple shields, and there's so many things around, but and so many misconceptions still. But
Yes.
obviously, that all starts mostly post birth, and it just feels like there's a massive gap.
There is a massive gap. There is one element where it's very tricky for the maternal brain to accept and retain information that comes after the baby is being born. So you're
Yeah, of
there,
course.
keeping this baby alive in your tummy and focusing on the birth. You have to get this baby out, and you have to get this baby out in a safe way. And that takes
Yeah,
so much of your effort, energy, and mental capacity that even
yeah.
when I was teaching antenatal classes and I was really wanting to give us, in a simple way, information that was going to really help these couples, embrace feeding, hopefully easier or better, it was still really tricky to get there. I realized that was a big, important learning point from me, that I think we have to get there really early on once the baby is born. So maybe,
Yeah.
yes, there has to be more antenatal education, 100%, but always knowing that it only really is going to, that information is only going to be fully welcome, but not because it's not welcome, just because it's the ability to actually retain that information and be
Mm,
able to deal with it once a mom has a baby in her arms, or the baby's born, maybe they're
mm.
in a neonatal unit, but the baby's now there. And now we are in this second stage where we think about feeding.
Yeah. So many parents, like you said, are told breastfeeding is natural and they're surprised when it feels difficult post birth.
Yeah.
So what in your experience, with the Milky Life and your job, your NHS job, what challenges do you mostly see in the few days after birth?
Well, and this probably comes a lot with what you've just said about the lack of support and different type of information. There's
Yeah.
two big things. I mean, the NHS is full, packed with really well-meaning people with who have all of the good intention to help, but who are
Mhm.
100% overstretched with poor resources, and unfortunately, when it comes to infant feeding, poor training and education. So, for example, in pediatrics, there are no resources and no jobs that are directly infant feeding related. And for example,
Really?
you with Arlo, you've had a long journey of being in pediatric units or in children's hospital, and believe it or not, there there's anyone who is specifically trained to support infant feeding in pediatrics currently in the NHS. That
What do they do when they're in if they go into a pediatric unit and they need help? Like, where do they go back to, like, the midwives or the
Well, like for example, without thinking of a baby that needs long-term pediatric care, just that day 5 baby that gets weighed, right? Usually midwives or maternity support workers come to your house, weigh the baby on day 5, and surprise, surprise, maybe that baby has lost more than 10%, and they send you to hospital. You're there waiting in a A&E. A&E is the worst place for a day 5 postnatal
Yeah.
family. It's absolute hell, and you're there waiting for ages, and then you get seen by a nurse and a pediatrician who don't have training in supporting infant feeding diets. So they put you on these feeding plans, and then you get seen by people who have no training in infant feeding. And the truth is the same with GPs, and it's the same with health visitors, and it's even the same with midwives. So midwives, we are the ones that get the highest level of training in our career, related to infant feeding, and it's still really poor, Rosie. So it's almost the system is set up
Broken.
is broken and is set up for failure. And if you join poor training, poor knowledge, all different advice, whatever might feel that is suitable at that time, and then women's and families having babies alone with no support from other breastfeeding parents and mothers, and aunties and sisters and grandmas around you, then then it's no shocking that we have the poor breastfeeding rates that we have, and that the problem is how large is the percentage of women who report that they have to stop breastfeeding before they were ready or wanted to. And that is what then has a massive effect on women's mental health, because it leaves you an ache. It leaves you with trauma. It leaves you with grief, and we don't address it.
Yeah, it's interesting when you said about, I mean, there's a couple of things I was thinking as you spoke there. One, that weigh-in and the anxiety that I used to get about those weigh-ins. And I remember I was really lucky with my midwife when I had Arlo, because he was weighed, and yes, he was like over that 10% thing, but she was like, hold on a minute. I'm just going to go away and have a think and do some research about his condition, because I don't want to jump on a feeding plan when I'm not entirely convinced that's what we need to do. So I was really lucky because I didn't. But the first time I did, I remember looking at this feeding plan with Albert and being like, when am I meant to like sleep or shower or eat? It was like I couldn't process it in my head. But also, by the time I'd got the breastfeeding referral in for the nurse to come, my nipples were bleeding.
Yeah.
I was every time she latched, I was crying. I was holding my mental health had like plummeted. It was like I don't even know what day it was, but it was too far. I couldn't do it. And I actually ended up pumping this is because she was a COVID baby. I couldn't have done this with Arlo. But I actually ended up pumping every 3 hours for 6 months for Alba to give her breast milk, which I never thought I'd done. But I think one of the things that I've really learned when becoming a mum and the whole breastfeeding thing, because I wasn't breastfed. I was just like, look, I'll do whatever works best for me, and I wasn't really mega precious about it. But like you said, when the milk comes in, you become a mum and you've got a baby that can do this thing, you do put that pressure on you. And I've had so many conversations with mums that I had a conversation with the mum the other day who I referred to you, who was like, I am miserable. I'm on this feeding plan. I'm not enjoying my maternity leave. I am looking at my child who's needing me to pick her up, but I can't pick her up because I'm pumping. And I had to have this really honest conversation with her. Like, I've been where you are, and there has to be a way up of your well-being and your happiness and how relaxed you are, because that all feeds into breastfeeding too, if that's what you want to do. But there was something, she was just putting so much pressure on you. She knew she needed to stop it, but she just couldn't and wouldn't. And there's something so like, I don't know, it's just built in us as mums. But for me, there's so much anxiety and not enough education around like the weigh-ins and how much babies gain each day. And I had to learn that with Arlo, and it was really helpful that I did. But yeah, it felt like, I know you'll agree with this, that often or not, when people are lucky enough to find you and the services you offer, it's often too late. They're often
Yeah.
too far gone in that hole of hell.
Yeah, you've hit it in the nail, the head, the nail, the head in the nail,
The nail in the head.
the nail in the head. I told you I'll do something like this. You don't need to take it out. You can so people can have a chuckle.
Take it out.
The feeding plans. Feeding plans. If anyone hears this is where majority of the problems start. I don't even call them a feeding plan. They're a cruel.
No, it's not.
They're not sustainable. No one ever, unless you chose to, previously that you wanted to just pump. Majority of women don't choose to have a relationship with their pump. And this feeding plans that someone wrote on paper saying you feed your baby for 20 minutes, you pump for 20 minutes, and then your partner gives the top up. And then you start again 3 hours after from when the moment you started. And
Yeah, I was
somehow
like,
there is no enough hours, and you have to do that 8 times a day. There's
yeah, if you could
not.
just stay on the sofa or in
Yeah.
bed all day. I honestly remember my brain couldn't compute it. Also, we'll come on to pumps, but I feel like again, from if you want to breastfeed, you need to get a pump, period. Like that's how I feel about it from my
Yeah.
experiences and you know, but I don't know.
No, but obviously because that was your experience, and that is sadly the experience of a lot of women, when really and truly we forget that what we have there is a baby that is perfectly designed, Rosie, to do the
Mm,
job. Okay,
mm,
so the unless we have a baby who cannot latch very well, which there what you have to address is the positioning, is the technique, is the latch.
yeah,
Okay, do we have a tongue tie? Let's address that. But apart from
yeah.
that, majority of babies can latch. So it's about fixing the problem at the
A
breast.
lot of women, sorry, a lot of women don't like it's the things that you were saying. I mean, we've had many conversations, but a lot of women, when they give birth, one, don't know what tongue tie is or
Yeah.
what it would look like. Two, they don't know anything about latch really. I remember being sent a really helpful YouTube video that I used to just watch all the time and like kind of train myself in it. But and three, like the pain thing, that whole thing of like if you're in pain, something's wrong.
Yeah.
But if you have suddenly something sucking on one thing 24/7,
Yes.
7 days a week, you're gonna feel an impact. But, like, there's so much mixed messages out there, and people don't know what these things are, and I guess what I'm going back to our original question is that there's no opportunity for these things to be set as part of our normal care that we get.
No. Yes. Correct. I mean, with pain, normal. So nipple tenderness is normal in the first couple of weeks. By default, no one would have had someone suckling from their nipple 24/7, right? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
tenderness is normal, but misshapen nipples are not normal. Nipples are going blanched or white or like lipstick shape, not normal. Broken nipples, bleeding nipples, scabs, not normal. And
Yeah,
the breast is beautifully vascularized, lots of nerve endings to tell you something is not right. Yeah.
yeah,
So that tenderness, okay, but not anything else. And if someone says to you, it looks good, the latch looks good, but you're like curling your toes and
mm,
dreading the
yeah,
next feed, then it doesn't matter that that latch looks good to whoever is checking that latch. There's something
mm,
not right there. And going back, if it's okay, to the feeding plans, and I say this, I go back to it because I think it's so important, and it is, I think, one of the biggest responsibles for women's breastfeeding journeys to end prematurely. It is definitely one of the reasons when we put women in these feeding plans. And whenever I see anyone, my goal number one is to put an end to the feeding plan. And that is because when you
really.
said, what did you wish women and families knew? And one of them is
Mm,
that breastfeeding shouldn't be seen as all or nothing.
okay,
Yeah. So you could have your whatever is your feeding goal before you had your baby. And then a lot of things can get on the way. And there are, yes, majority of women actually, if with the right support, can produce enough amount of milk. But for many, that support comes a bit too late. And for
mm,
other, number of women, they can't produce a full supply.
yeah,
But that pressure and that almost like you either achieve that goal of exclusive breastfeeding on the otherwise it means you can't breastfeed. It should never be
yeah,
seen like that. And I think that is
yeah,
one of the biggest problems here. You can't keep a baby to the breast for comfort, for bonding, for that moment of peace with your baby where you actually are having, a one-to-one physical relationship with them, for to shut them up a little bit. Sometimes there's, nothing easier than
Have a moment.
whack the baby on the boob and then they stop crying or fussing or whatever. And if you need to top up with formula, whether or because you want to or because you need to, that's okay. That's totally
Yeah.
fine. But it should never be seen as all or nothing. And as you obviously well know, oxytocin is protective of our mental health. And while and I think what makes me really, really sad is that because of how I mean us healthcare professionals, approach breastfeeding support and how we intervene and manage it, then women's mental health can become so affected, so deteriorated that then they stop breastfeeding and remove this very protective mechanism of releasing of oxytocin that they have in their body, that they're supposed to, from a physiological and biological point of view, their body is supposed to be exposed to that release of oxytocin for a long time. Because, if you think of what the biological norm is, infants are supposed to be breastfed or in contact with
Mhm.
some breastfeeding for the first 2 years of their life. So what we're doing is, as mothers, raising children, surviving the postnatal period, which is so long actually, it's actually 3 years
Yeah.
long. We need that help of that oxytocin flowing in our
Yeah.
bodies. And the fact that we are cutting it off, removing it so prematurely and drastically, then is having such a negative effect on women's mental health long term, and it leaves them with this grief and this trauma. And I feel a little
Yeah.
bit we are doing us with poor support, and how little family friendly our society has become. That's what we are doing
Mm.
that to mothers and babies and families.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think you don't prepare yourself for that. Well, you can't prepare, you can only prepare so much, can't you, for like the hormones that are going to drop. And again, the way that you birth impacts that. I remember I had an elective C-section at 42 plus 2 with Albert, and then my milk took, I think I gave birth on the Monday, my milk didn't come in till the Friday. So it was like, you know, no one had said that might happen, or and it feels like what you're saying is you are on you, whether you give birth, I guess in this locality, we can only really speak for Sussex, can't we? But you give birth in this locality, like you've got to put some work in to know what's out there for you, what support's out there for you. It's not exclusive, like you said. I love what you said about doing what's best for you and your mental health and your baby as well. I know that in Sussex at the moment, I think there's a 2 to 3 week wait on the NHS for a tongue tie assessment period. So whether we like it or not, we are being disadvantaged by the systematic pressure at the moment. And if you're lucky enough or to fall into the pocket of someone like you, or talk to someone like me who can be like, I know someone who can help
Yeah.
you, like go and see Carla. It feels so mad, for want of a better
Yeah.
word, that's the only way that you're probably going to be successful in a breastfeeding journey, is if you know someone that's got all the knowledge, because that knowledge just isn't really there
It's
if
not
you're in the
there.
normal
And
system.
also, if you can afford it, and
Yeah, exactly.
I make a living of this, but
Yeah,
I wish more than anything that families didn't have to pay for private feeding support, that they didn't have to pay to get their baby's tongue tie released because the wait is too long. I think everybody should have access to an infant feeding specialist the first 2 to 3 weeks from their moment their baby is born, 2 or 3 times a week. And that would
100%,
change
100%.
everything. And the same applies really, Rosie, to bottle feeding families. If breastfeeding families get little support, bottle feeding families get none, because it's all become
Yeah,
so much of this obsession with the infant putting on weight or not. And bottle fed babies are less likely to lose weight or struggle with their weight gain. They're getting no
yeah.
support. And I get lots of bottle feeding families not preparing formula safely, something so basic, not being spoken about. Responsive bottle feeding. What is the baby expecting? What is the biological norm? How tiny are their tummies? This whole
I know.
obsession, yeah, with this whole obsession with
Um,
feed the fill their tummy so they sleep longer. I mean, don't get me started on sleeping here.
I was running a group, and I see the mums now with the apps and the need oh, they need a feed. The baby's perfectly happy and, like, they need a feed, and then I've seen it with mums where the baby's, like, falling asleep, they're really content, but they're like, "No, I need to get this bottle in them. Like, I need to do this," because it becomes routine rather than responsive, like you said, and you know when something's gone too far and you don't want to be that person that's like, I don't think that's, but it's such, like you said, people get into those route, and especially if you have like NICU input, or you're put in a less, well, a less oxytocin inducing
Yeah,
environment, let's say,
yeah,
around
yeah, yeah,
routines and feeding and weight gain and
yeah.
health, and it's, you're starting totally on the back foot. And what you were saying there about, I to I feel exactly the same way as you about my service in terms of postnatal well-being and emotional mental health for women. I believe every woman should have someone like me, someone who's trained as a mental health professional, either phoning them or preferably visiting them at home 2 to 3 times a week and being like,
Yeah.
"How are you? What's on your mind? What's going on? What's bothering you?" That would tie into feeding 100%. My nipples are hurting. I can't sleep. I'm worried about weight gain.
Yeah.
Lack of sleep and feeding, massive link there. A baby's cluster feeding. I think about tongue tie. I think I don't, milk supply. Women worry so
So
much about
much,
milk supply.
so much.
I remember being like, I'm so worried about my supply. And I remember this amazing midwife when I had my an Arlo. I was, you always turn up at the, like, you've just gone to sleep and they turn up or something, or the baby.
Yeah.
I just got into bed after my C-section. Arlo was asleep. I just got into bed with my fresh shower, PJs. I was going to try and nap. Ding dong at the door. I said to Lloyd, "Please, can you ask the midwife if they're comfortable just to come and sit in the bed with me, because I can't
Of
move.
course.
I'm so tired." She was like, "Of course." She came, sat down. She was so lovely. I think I had a huge red flag against my name anyway because of Arlo. It was quite helpful. People had to be a bit more sensitive.
Yeah.
But she was like, "Rosie, I can hear him guzzling. I can hear him guzzling milk." I mean, she put her ear right up to my breast and she was like, "What are you worrying about? He's gulping milk. I can hear it." So yeah, he's not putting on whatever we want him to put on every day, but he's he's not drowsy.
Yeah.
She was like, "He's fine." And one or two people in that really crucial period can make such a big difference,
Oh
because
yes,
it's
massive.
a wild old time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
So we've talked about people coming to you when it's so late and when their mental
Yes.
health's impacted, or they haven't realized that these services are out there. Like,
Yeah.
I know so many people that have seen you and been like, "Oh my God, don't know what I'd have done if I hadn't found her." So when should someone seek professional help? Like, what are the main signs? I appreciate that everyone's feeding journey is different
Yeah.
and it's really hard to
No,
generalize,
no.
just like people's mental health as well. But what are the flags that people should maybe be seeking some professional help in their feeding journey?
So that I'm glad you've asked that question. A big one, big one. Like, well, if feeding is generating anxiety for you while you're pregnant, then talk to someone then. It could be just a phone call or a video call, and you can get advice that is more tailored to you and address, whatever is that is generating anxiety. So that could be that. But once the baby is born, a really big one is, and this is where you said it before about you had your cesarean section and then your milk came in on the Friday. So what we know is that the way the baby is born doesn't affect the physiology of lactation. What affects the physiology of lactation is whether there is a delay in that milk being removed from the breast. So not you giving your baby colostrum that you antenatally hand expressed. It's about whether the baby actively latches in the first 2 hours after the birth. And if that is not possible for whatever reason, if you were able to extract, so hand express colostrum, because it's that first removal of milk from the breast. And this is so important. In the first 2 hours after the birth, what triggers milk production, what makes your
Okay.
milk coming at the right time, which is ideally day 3.
Right.
So babies do well with colostrum, small and frequently, the first 3 days. But on day 3, your milk should be coming in. So first flag would be no latching or no colostrum being removed right after the birth.
Okay.
And second one would be your milk not coming in on day 3. If you are
Okay.
finding yourself there, that's a really important time to say, I need help.
Yeah.
I
So I
need
didn't
help.
know that. I would have done it, you know.
Yes,
And
people don't
I
know
remember
that.
when I had Arlo, I did have a midwife come in and say, should we get some colostrum for him? And he, you know, because obviously it was like day 2 or something. But I remember being so tired, and this is like the second time mum thing. I remember being like, I don't do you mind doing it? So I honestly do
Yeah,
not have the energy to even do this
go
right
there.
now. And
Yeah.
I was like so tired. I've needed transfusion, everything away. And she did it. But then it all came back to me. And actually I knew the best way to move my breast, my
Yeah.
nipple to get
Yeah.
the colostrum out. And it was, but again, like if that midwife hadn't come in and been like, should we try and get some colostrum out? I wouldn't have done it. And then that's another. So I was just thinking back to your point there around a lot of women don't get to do the feeding thing within 2 hours. A lot
Yes.
of women that I see
Yeah.
have traumatic births. Their baby's taken sometimes, you know, even maybe for days before they see them, or they need surgery, or we know there's so many things that can happen.
So many things.
So what you're saying is if you can't latch within the first 2 hours post-birth, the hand expression of the colostrum with support is really important.
100%, because it's that removal of colostrum that tells you have to think of what would have happened hundreds of years ago in the cave era. Not all babies survived childbirth. And if there
Yeah.
is no infant that needs to be fed, then the body
Mm.
doesn't need, is cruel for the body, the
Yeah.
woman to go through engorgement and lots of milk when there is no baby to be fed. So the body is
Yeah.
really smart, and it needs that message. It needs the
Yeah.
message of, yes, there is a baby to be fed. And that is either the baby at the breast or removing that colostrum. So because we're having this is another topic, but interventions in childbirth are on the rise and continue to be on the rise. You know, cesarean section is now over 50% of births instead of
Yeah.
around the recommended 20%. Forceps, you know, and so many more babies needed admissions at the NICU, so many more premature babies being born. The message that I give you, the best advice I can give you, because we can always, most of the times we can always work with the latch later on, but we need a supply, some sort of a supply,
Yeah.
but we need a supply.
Yeah.
Within 2 hours, please, even if you tell your partner, please, if you see me there, exhausted in that recovery room, you know, unable to really move, please hand express my milk. Even if you don't manage to collect it, it's not so much about, believe it or not, it's not so much about feeding that baby in that moment. It's about triggering that physiological
Removal.
process of getting
Yeah.
lactogenesis to happen. So the production of milk, the start of milk production happening. That's
Okay.
like
And
key.
and you mentioned engorgement, which I think again is, you know, 9 times out of 10, whether you I mean, I like to think that the way that I initiated breastfeeding with Arlo was quite textbook. And like you said, I did the hand expressing. I got him on. He had a beautiful latch. I think that was the one element of my journey with Arlo that went well, you know. But I still, the night my milk came in, my boobs went rock hard.
Yeah.
I had again a lovely midwife who was like, "Hold on, let me go to my freezer." And great tip here, she'd like frozen huge sanitary pads in the shape of a C to go on them. But and then he fed through that, and obviously it released.
Yeah.
But a lot of women aren't ready for that hard engorgement feeling, and it's such a cringy, horrible, weird, foreign feeling. So does that happen to every woman? And what do you say about that?
It doesn't happen to every woman. And in fact, you are more likely to have engorgement if your breasts were small before. If there wasn't a lot of breast tissue, then so the size of the breast is determined by fat tissue. And the milk
Okay.
production is determined by glandular tissue or milk making tissue. So if you don't have a
Okay.
lot of breast tissue there, then
Yeah.
all that sudden, refill of those milk making glands, so pockets where the milk is sort of sitting there, will make for more engorgement. Mothers with larger breasts might not feel that engorgement. And that's an important message. You don't have to feel engorged to know that your milk has come in. There's some changes. They do get heavier, they get warmer. You might start leaking, you might not. Not all women leak. There's so many oh, I might not have a good supply because I've never leaked. And you don't have to.
Yeah.
You really don't have to leak. But when you are having your engorged, ice helps pushing the breast tissue back and sending all that fluid back onto your lymphatic system. Sometimes it gives you enough time to soften some tissue at the front, just enough to latch the baby, and then the baby, if they can latch well, they do their thing, and then they drain the breast. But yes, it can certainly be more difficult. There's so many things, women with flatter or inverted nipples. A lot of people will say, oh, babies breastfeed, they don't nipple feed, you'll be fine. It's not fair on them. They do actually have a bit of a harder time latching those babies in the early days. Or moms with really large breasts that, need quite a lot of support. Sometimes we do rolls with muslin cloths, and, you get creative to support the weight of the breast to help the baby not slip off the nipple. There's so many things. Ultimately, advice needs to be tailored, Rosie.
Yeah. And you made me think there as well around that, the individual thing and the way that our bodies are physiologically. And I think I've mentioned it to you and quite a few times on the podcast, but I actually had breast reduction
Okay.
about 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And I remember when I was asked about, oh, do you have plans to breastfeed? And I said, I'd like to. And I was basically told, you probably won't be able to do it. You probably will not. So I was kind of ready not to.
Okay.
And then actually, I mean, Arlo was exclusively breastfed for a year. Like it happened. So I think again, there's so much we can't even educate around like the basic things, like you just said around the 2 hour thing. I've just learned that, and I'm like 2 babies down. But I guess I am an example of someone who was told you probably won't be able to breastfeed, and I did. So it's interesting what you said. I wonder what my experience would have been like without. I guess that just really made me think there about you don't know until you're in that moment, until you try, right?
100%. And I do think there is a point antenatally where we should go. Like when I see women, I always ask them for their certain risk factors that can put you at risk of low production. And we should be asking those questions antenatally, never to say to a woman, you're very likely not be able to breastfeed, but to give them some warning signs. If this is happening, then let's look at this, or to put more visits for that mom if we know
To know what to look out
had
for.
exactly breast reduction for in your case, for example. But you never know what is going to happen. And the advice, first of all, something that people get really everyone says, I got given so much conflicted advice, right? That is number one complaint from families. And there's two things to that. One is that a day one baby is very different to a 1 week-old baby, 1 month-old baby, 10 months-old baby. So advice will change. And in the first 6 weeks, advice continues to change, initially day by day, and then sort of week by week. So we have to take that into consideration. But in the same day, you shouldn't be getting 4 different types of advice that is conflicted of each other. So that is where the lack of knowledge comes. And then very rarely you can generalize, like we just said. You cannot generalize with breastfeeding. Women get told all sorts of things. It's a few myths, like the baby needs to feed for 20 minutes so that they reach the fatty milk. Can we call it BS? Please, is that rude if we might say BS?
No, go for it. Swear and go.
That is not true. It makes me want to hit my head against the wall every time I hear that, because the content of fat changes through the day, and it's about what the baby gets in 24 hours. And because we all have a different storage capacity, which is how much milk you store at one time when you're at your fullest, which is different to your overall 24-hour supply capacity. So you can keep a baby there for 20 minutes. What if they're sleeping for 15? They're not going to be getting the fatty milk, the watery milk, or the sugary milk. And that advice is so old and it still gets told over and over to women.
Oh,
For example,
really?
that's one. I could write a book with all the things that I hear women get told.
Tongue tie gets talked about a lot, but again, there's not that much education around what the signs are. So, how do you know if a baby's got tongue tie?
Okay, so ideally, all babies would be checked in the hospital, and then at around day 5 or day 7, they should be checked. A pediatrician will do a head, or a midwife trained to do so. They'll do a head-to-toe check, and they do put their finger in the baby's mouth. And a lot of people think that they're there checking for tongue tie, but they're not. Majority of pediatricians are not trained to diagnose tongue ties, and majority of midwives are not, unfortunately, trained to diagnose for tongue tie. They're checking for cleft palate when they're doing that, right? So pain, despite good positioning and attachment, pain. Poor weight gain, despite good positioning and attachment, and maybe even a mom who has good supply, but the baby is still not putting on weight. A baby that comes on and off the breast all the time, that can be a sign. Despite misshapen nipples, baby who needs to feed super frequently because they're just not being efficient. Sometimes you get babies who put on weight well and are not causing any pain, and they do actually have a tongue tie. These babies get missed a lot, and often down the line, these moms start struggling with their supply because their babies weren't efficient enough at the breast, and her supply
Oh,
was
okay.
compensating for the poor feeding. That happens more than you think. So again, in an ideal scenario, all babies would be checked, would have a proper oral assessment done.
I mean, we just need to redesign the system, don't we?
Yeah.
We've talked about this, but when you are a tongue tie practitioner, so if I came to you and my baby had tongue tie and they needed it cutting, a lot of women worry about doing that to their baby. What does that look like? What do you do?
Well, I often say if your baby would have a restriction anywhere else in their body, right? If they would come with fingers that are fused like this, and someone said there is this very low risk, simple procedure that would allow to remove that restriction of the body, what would you say? A majority of the time
Yeah, yeah.
they're like, many moms say it feels selfish that I'm doing it for me. And I'm like, you're not. Actually, you're doing it for your infant. The
Mm,
tongue is involved in so much. We only do it for feeding purposes. However, the more we look into it, the more we realize how many long-term effects could be
mm,
avoided if babies with tongue
mm,
ties would have their tongue tie released, even with those babies who put on weight and don't cause any pain to the mother. Sleep, digestion, so many toddlers being labeled as fussy eaters because they can't move the food bolus in the mouth appropriately. It's just reflux, and it's just linked to so many things. I think you have
yeah,
to see it as you're doing something good for your baby because the benefits will always outweigh the potential risks or the discomfort that the baby might feel in that moment. There's so many
yeah.
adults getting it done now for so many different reasons.
Really?
Yes. Yep.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
no. Wow. Didn't know that. I was just thinking about some of the myths that go round in terms of like supply. You've mentioned a couple of
Yeah.
them. Combi feeding we've covered. You can do both. It shouldn't affect. I know you're all clued up on. You've mentioned a couple, and I was thinking about mental health and stress. Um, and if a mum is more stressed, does that impact their supply?
So, not your ability to produce milk. What stress affects is your ability to release oxytocin. And oxytocin is involved in how easy or not the milk flows. So,
Right.
your milk production is dependent on the amount of glandular tissue in the body and your prolactin release. Prolactin is released in the pituitary gland. But then oxytocin is what actually allows the milk to flow. And oxytocin is
Okay.
the, that relaxing, calm love hormone. So if you're in a state of acute stress, then your flow of milk will be affected in that moment. So if you are just received really bad news, let's say, for example, and you're pumping, yeah, and someone just said something really, or you've just got on an argument with your partner and you put the pump, it's going to take you a while for that milk to stop flowing. But
Hmm.
stress on its own, and I say this, I think having a baby on its own can be really stressful, right? And then there's so many other factors. Your baby can be sick, or they can be in the neonatal unit. They can have a condition. You can, I don't know. Maybe your partner left you when you were pregnant, and you are in this situation of chronic
High
stress.
stress. Yeah.
And actually, our bodies are very robust and very well designed to
Mm,
keep our babies alive, that we can cope
yeah.
with that. Like women breastfeed in war zones, women breastfeed when they're fleeing their
Yeah, of
countries.
course. Yeah.
Yeah, because we can, our bodies are like steel tanks, they're so well designed to, for deal with adversity and still feed our babies. And I think it's really
Yeah.
unkind to tell a woman who is stressed to tell her, you need to relax, otherwise your milk won't happen.
Yeah.
When has that been
Counterproductive.
helpful? Yeah, that has never been helpful. So if we can do things, put things in place to make her life less stressful, or her situation or whatever, we can do that. But to tell someone, because it makes it their fault. You're stressed, and so your milk, is not good enough, or is not gonna
That's
come
on
in,
you.
and then
Yeah.
then they're just more stress.
Yeah. I feel like one thing I've learned since starting Postnatal Minds, sometimes the push women need to seek help, to contact one of us, is when they have a friend who's like, "Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
contact them, they saved me." Or
yeah,
one session with them, and honestly, I don't know what I'd be like if I hadn't, kind of thing.
yeah,
So can you tell us, maybe some of the recent clients that have come to
yeah.
you, and some success stories, or maybe, some of them make just a bit of an insight into what you do, and
Yeah.
what you've helped with recently.
So, like, for example, one of my recent clients is baby number 3. I had seen her with baby number 2. She's had 3 very different journeys with all of her babies, and actually they've all been in some ways tricky. And then with this third one, she contacted me. Her baby had lost over 12%, was sent to the hospital, really stressful situation. This baby also had a tongue tie, and she knew the baby had a tongue tie, and she knew that she wasn't feeding well, and contacted me, and I ran there. Actually, went on a Sunday, left the girls in the house. I'm like, I just need to go and help this mama because she's in a bit of a state,
Yeah, care.
and I couldn't leave another day knowing that she was where she was, and she had been told, we're coming to weigh the baby in 24 hours. If there is no weighing in 24 hours, then you'll have to be admitted. That's that. Her milk was not flowing, Rosie, because there was this massive, almost like a gun to her head type of scenario. And this baby, had lost weight, was a little bit like, quite sleepy, not doing a lot. And you walked in, she was crying already. Sometimes they just see you, they see you, help
Yeah,
is
you must
coming.
see a lot of tears. I know
Help
I
is
do.
coming, and then this release of, I'm like, fine, let's do that. Let's cry. Let's focus on what's happening. Leave that threat of that hospital admission where you already have 2 babies. Put it back. Yeah, let's not look at that. And we just worked with that baby at the breast. It was a baby that took a while to get going actively. She had to do some pumping. Never triple feeding. Never, you'll never see me putting you on a triple feeding plan ever. But there was some
Some
pumping.
of the most sad, stressed mums that I see are the ones that are triple
Yeah,
feeding. I mean,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And this baby, we did the tongue tie release there and then as well, and it took her, it took her a few days, but she's off flying with feeding. Now, another one I saw, this mom was incredible. It was long. I got there quite late. She had already seen someone else, had a tongue tie division done as well. Not that all the problems are tongue tie, these two just happened to be. But when I got to her, her supply was now quite affected. The baby was having some oral aversion and feeding aversion, not want, really lots of tears, lots of crying, and not putting on enough weight. And she had to introduce formula, which in her case, she wanted to try and avoid it, but she was already in this place of having to combi feed. But she could see that it was just slipping off her completely the possibility of ever breastfeeding her baby, because now we had a baby that was angry and upset at the breast. And those are one of
Yeah.
the most heartbreaking ones, to be honest. And we worked together. We changed a little bit of the moments when we offer the breast, catch the baby in better moments, and we added something that's called an SNS, or a supplementary nursing system. Some babies develop very quickly a flow preference. They want milk quick and easy, and they have no time or patience for the breast. And this mom had a great support system, and we introduced this SNS, where it's like a little tube. Milk goes in a bottle or a pouch, a little tube that you stick to the breast, latch the baby, and they get milk from there. And while they're getting milk from there, they're also stimulating the breast. And you play with the flow of that and slow it down or increase it with the baby's needs. And eventually she had to do it less and less. And then she sent me a photo the other day of how much weight the baby's putting. She's back to fully breastfeeding. And it was quite late when I saw her, but it was completely turned around, and so beautifully. It makes me emotional actually
Transform.
thinking about it.
Yeah. With what you do, you must give women a lot of hope. And I wonder if that's one of your messages, is that yes, it can be late in your feeding journey, but it's never too late.
It's never too late. And because of this whole thing of it's not all or nothing, I think we very quickly tell women, just stop. They get told this all the time. Just stop. You've done enough. You tried enough. Why don't you just stop? It's not that simple. And I think majority of the time, women need to get there they need to get there themselves. They have to be ready emotionally. They have to be ready to stop. But if I say to you, it's okay to stop, it's like I'm giving up on you. And if the one last help that you've reached out to gives up on you, then what hope do you have? When what you need someone is to come, listen to what's happened, try to fix it. And if you can't fully fix it, there is always a
It's
way
okay.
of making it sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess there are going to be, just on the other side, because I've seen women who, have had that experience and had trauma, like, just vocalizing again for the purpose of this podcast, the amount of times I say to women, and you might not like the sound of this, Carla, but like, fed is best.
Oh,
If your mental health is going to be protected and you can't do any more, that's okay. That's all right. Like, I wasn't breastfed. I'm all right. Like, it's, you are
well,
that you cannot have there's enough pressure on women and mums,
yeah.
and we've got to have flexibility.
I don't know when this whole breast is best, like if it's a competition. Okay, I don't know when that happened. I wish it didn't, because it created a mom war, and we need to be joining together instead of fighting each other or feeling, but when you ask women, and this is the
Mm.
baseline point problem here, is when you ask women whether they are exclusively breastfed, free birth in a forest, whatever, or they had an elective cesarean section and they're bottle feeding or anything in between, they all feel judged. You ask
Yeah,
them
there's
and
a
they
lot
all
of
feel
judgment still
not
around.
supported and judged by their choices. And that happens
Yeah.
regardless of what you choose to do or
Okay.
what happens to you. And that is where the problem lies. Of course, fed is best. Babies need to feed, and moms need to feel that they are feeding their baby. You get given this baby, and they're like, "Congratulations, bye, keep it alive." And you're like,
Yeah. go keep that alive, and we'll see you, like, maybe we
Keep it
won't tell you
alive.
when we're coming. It'll be random. We'll come and see if yeah. And if they haven't put on weight, then you might be readmitted. Yeah, like,
Yeah,
great.
exactly.
You do we all had that moment where we got home. I mean, mine was in COVID, so
God,
bloody
maybe.
hell did I have this moment. I got home. I mean, Lloyd was only allowed to visit for 1 hour postnatally. I was like, "Take the baby, I need to shower and not faint." But, like, I can remember it so well now, like, plonking Albert on the floor in the car seat and being like, "What now?" Like, when she wakes up, I don't actually know what I'm doing.
We
Like,
don't know.
we all have that moment, and it's so key that we have
Yeah,
well, we don't necessarily have it, but we know that that's there, and like you said, triggering it early, like, I look back now, like, if I'd known you were around, my experiences could have been so
so
different.
different.
So two kind of questions, and this podcast episode could be a whole day long because there's so many
Yeah.
eventualities and the scenarios, but 2 things. One, I wanna know from you, what is that one message you'd like to give every new parent listening today to remember? And 2, I just wanted you to let listeners know where they can find reliable breastfeeding support
Yeah.
along with where they can find you.
Yeah. So one is lower your expectation on what normal infant behavior is like. Don't get trapped with apps and accounts of people telling you what a baby should do and when and the times of it. Look at your baby. Even in the most exhausting state that you could be, you have instinct and they won't fail you. Hold on to them and look at your baby. And the other one is ask for help early. If you find yourself trapped in any sort of feeding issue, get help early. There is help out there and it's worth it. It's really worth it. Reliable breastfeeding support you can find anywhere you are in the country. You can either go a lactation consultant near me or the lactation consultant of Great Britain website. It's like our register directory.
Directory.
If
Yeah.
we are trained lactation consultants, our name should be there. If you
Okay.
are in West Sussex, I'm very happy to come and see you. My name is the Milky Life as well. You can find me that way there. But if you're feeling it's that if something doesn't feel right, if your things are not progressing or changing quickly, you're stuck with pain, you're not feeling listened, or 1 week passes and the other week passes and you're still stuck in this plan, then change the strategy, change the tactic, change the advice that you're listening to. Something these things usually with feeding gets reversed relatively quickly when picked up early enough. It shouldn't be something that 1 week and 1 week and 1 week and you're still experiencing problems because it's very time sensitive. Getting
Yeah.
breastfeeding going well and supply going well is very time sensitive.
I love what you said there about gut because we don't mother and gut instinct enough and how we've all been in those places before where we're being given advice, but we're like, I just don't feel like this is me or
Mm,
this connects with what I've seen of my baby and I don't know how we can do that, but bottling up that confidence no matter how tired you are, how emotional
yeah.
you are, if something doesn't feel right, that asking for help is normally the biggest and hardest step, but it can be the most freeing one.
Yeah. And the other one is the baby that feeds for 15, 20 minutes and sleeps for 3 hours and quickly sleeps through the night. That baby doesn't exist. So if you're being sold a
Yeah.
baby, you're being sold a lie. That baby doesn't exist. And we set families up for failure with that message.
Yeah, because as soon as a baby comes out, the first question people will ask is, "How much sleep are you
Yeah.
getting? How's your sleep?"
Is it
And
a good
actually,
baby?
again, we need to reframe that conversation that if you're breastfeeding, you're gonna have broken sleep for quite a while, let's be honest. You are.
You are, and if you are bottle feeding, actually, you should be taught how to responsive bottle feed so you follow your baby's physiological and biological needs. And it should never
Yeah.
be that they sleep through the night because they get a very, very large bottle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So true. Something that's very premature in its journey, but a way that And one of the reasons that Carla and I connected is a new venture.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to talk about that, Carla.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So, well, this is a half of the full collective. Is four of us. We are really excited, and we are wanting to offer what we consider is the four pillars of good maternal health and well-being. What all women, as a minimum, as a bare standard, should be receiving when they find out they're pregnant. That is mental health, so important, nutrition, and trimester specific nutrition and supplementation, and your health overall. And that's where Laura Alarman comes into place. We'll do one day a podcast, the four of us, won't we, Rosie?
Yeah, we will. We will.
Your body, your physical body, your pelvic health, and your core. And that's where the fantastic Levi Moore comes into place, also known as the Mommy Physio. And the podcast, yeah.
Levi's known to the podcast.
Levi's
Yeah.
known to the podcast, yeah. And then infant feeding, whatever, breast, bottle, anything in between, because all babies need to be fed. And that's where I come into place. So, yeah, if you want to say a bit more the rest of what the collective or how it works.
Yeah, so it's very much forming. We spoke a lot on this podcast episode about how every woman would have this level of care. And it doesn't seem to be coming anytime soon within the NHS pathway that women
No.
experience. So we are in the process of very soon launching a package of care that you can purchase pre or postnatally, where you can get checked in all of those areas that Carla just outlined by experienced female practitioners that we hope will bring safety, security, positive mental well-being, comfortable, positive experience, and ultimately, most importantly, arguably, allow you to have a positive postnatal experience and enjoy your maternity leave, because
100%.
so many women suffer more than they should. And we'll leave it there because we will do a podcast
Yes.
episode, the four of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
And that Laura and Levi are just so great, and it's really exciting.
It's about giving women the chance to take their health into their own hands and invest in their health, and then use our service whenever you need them the most. So it has that freedom and flexibility. So yeah, watch this space
Yeah.
for the Well Mother Collective.
Watch this space. Yeah, follow the Well Mother Collective, but also make sure that after this episode, that you follow Carla. She's at the Milky Life on Instagram, and she's so responsive, and everyone I have ever sent to her has just had an amazing experience. So yeah, make sure you give her a follow. Carla, thank you so
Thank you
much for
so much,
coming
Rosie.
on. I'm so glad we made it happen. And I hope that anyone listening has found all of this or part of it and taken something, but our main message is there is help there, and make sure you get it. And the earlier, the better.
The earlier
So
the better. Yeah.
yeah, thank you
Thank
so
you
much for
so much.
listening, and see
Thank
you next
you.
time.
Bye.
Bye.